Hello, I want to welcome you to Kingdom Success University, which is a faith based podcast that teaches kingdom principles in a practical but strategic way. Some of the key principles that will be highlighted but not limited to are effective communication, developing a success mindset, leadership skills, how to develop healthy relationships, finances, character, and much more. Let us explore how you can personally expand your capacity to succeed in life. Hi, my name is James. I am a proud father to two sets of twin girls who are 7 and 5. My background is in project and program management. I have been in the industry for over 16 years with certifications and experience in Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, Change Manager Practitioner, Project Management Professional, and Certified Scrum Master. When I'm not busy with my daughters or at work, I love to sing, dance, write, read, run 10 miles a day, work out, spend time with my family and friends, and listen to sermons. My overall mission is to teach the gospel to those who truly desire a change in their lives and are looking to reach their fullest potential in life. Welcome, Kingdom members. My name is James. Welcome to Kingdom Success University, where we teach kingdom principles in a strategic but practical way. I want to welcome you. I am excited about today's episode, which is how to maintain mental freedom. Now, I know that this is a hot topic with a lot of things that's going on in the world that I think that this is prevalent now more than ever. I want to talk about some of the things that maybe you and I face on a day-to-day basis, but never probably took time to think through and say, hey, why do I think that way? Why do I fringe at the thought of public speaking or finances or when it comes to a relationship? Why? And so I want to be able to highlight some things to help you, but also to help us to become a better society, but also better individuals. So I'm excited about this and really expose this important message to you. So I want to take a step back just to let you know, how did I get to this point of like being passionate with the kingdom and making things practical? Well, growing up as a child down in San Antonio, Texas, it was very, very interesting and unique to live with my mom at this point in time. Because I can tell you that my mom had a rough life when she was growing up, and when my sister and I were little, that there was just times where, hey, we were moving from place to place at times. It wasn't necessarily unstable, but we just, we weren't at places for a long, extended period of time. And so we moved around from San Antonio to San Angelo, from San Angelo back to San Antonio. And it was a very interesting time for my sister and I. And I love my mom. My mom is amazing. So I don't want to make this seem like she's a bad mom. So she's always been in my life. We have a great relationship. I love my mom. But it was just is what it is, right? Now, what happened though, during those times were traumatic situations. But what I didn't realize going through those situations, that those situations would carry over as a teenager, carry over as an adult to affect the way that I approach life, relationships, finances. And I never knew at this point in time in my life why I did what I did. Whether if it's a response, whether if it was a certain statement, a certain attitude, a certain feeling, I just never knew. But I could always feel it when any time that I would be in a particular situation. So I dug deep and I said, okay, hey, this is a time for me to grow. This is a time for me to understand, like, what is it that affects me in this way in terms of a response, in terms of this emotion or feeling. And this is when I started to know about spirituality, when I started to learn about mindset, when I started to learn about why it's so important to understand yourself, the reality of the situation, and how to maintain a certain type of mental freedom. So today's episode is about how to maintain mental freedom. I'm so excited about this that I didn't want to take much time away from this, but I want to talk about how do you and I maintain mental freedom. It's just not enough to be mentally free, but it's also important to maintain that mental freedom. Because I've met a lot of people who have lost weight, but then a couple of months down the line, they're bigger than what they used to be. Why? Because they never maintained the disciplines that help them get to the place of losing weight. So they lost track. And so today I'm here to talk about how do we get to mental freedom, but how do we also maintain mental freedom? And that's what I'm excited to talk about today. So today I will be breaking down a simple concept and packing it up in a nice package for you, and then get on out of here. So if you can bear with me, let's walk through this and then see where it lands. So I'm pulling from one of my favorite scriptures, John 8:31 through 32. And I want to walk you through this process of how I was able to identify freedom, but also how to maintain the mental freedom. Because how many of you out there have dealt with fear? How many of you have dealt with doubt? What about the fear of loss? So a lot of us have dealt with certain situations in our lives that maybe we've never told anyone about, but yet we know about. And so I hope that this message touched you the way that it touched me. So in John 8:31-32, Jesus was basically talking about this freedom we have. And so I want to show you the freedom that we do have, but how we maintain it. So in 31, it says, Jesus said to the people who believed in him, "You are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings." 32, "And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Now, this scripture has been quoted by many famous people. And what I would like to really talk about are 6 points to really focus our minds on. Number one, it highlights in the scripture about remain. We're going to get into details about that. But number two, it says faithful. Number three, the talking point is my teachings. Number four is twofold, which is and. Number five is knowing the truth. And then number six is the truth will set you free. So when we talk about mental freedom and how to maintain this mental freedom, we have to know that these are the 6 points that Jesus highlights about being free. So once we truly know what it takes to be free, then now we have the keys, we have the knowledge, the fortitude now to press in to maintain our mental freedom. But before we get into this, there are some prefaces that I like to set before stepping into this. Number one, we must start off with knowing our reality. Where are we at? I talk to many people because people come to me all the time and ask advice about relationships or whatever the advice may be. And before getting into the situation, I always ask, where are you at? Emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, where are you at? Because before we can address this situation, we first must address or acknowledge where you are at. Hey, whether if you have a bad attitude, we must acknowledge that. Whether if you're bad at finances, you must acknowledge that. Now, notice I didn't say what you think you where you think you're at, but we're saying really where you're at. Hey, look back, look at your situations. Hey, look at what your friends tell you on a continuous basis. Whether if you're late all the time. Guess what? Being late to meetings and being late to outings, that's really a attitude. That's an attitude, and that's a spirit that you don't ever want to function under because it's a sign of disrespect. So what we first must understand is, what is our reality? In order for us to move on, we must first know where we're at. That's number one. Number two, we must constantly expose ourselves to facts/truth. Because in order for us to move forward, we must first know the facts in order for us to now move in the direction that require us to change. And so in this, we must know that exposure to truth will keep us on a path of self-evaluation and self-realization. So those are the 2 points that I wanted to make before stepping into this. Now let's break this scripture down and see how we can go ahead and maintain mental freedom. So number one is remain. So when Jesus says, those who are my disciples that remain with me, that they're truly his disciples. It says, you are truly my disciples if you remain. Well, what does that mean? Well, in the biblical definition, it means to continue. To continue what? To rest or abide in a place for a time indefinite. So when breaking this down, we must first know something. We must first accept the fact that there will be fear and doubt present in our life. So in order to be courageous or have courage, fear must exist. So in order for you and I to have courage, fear first must exist. So we have to acknowledge that there will be pressure, there will be issues, there will be doubts and fear in situations that will be present, but it doesn't mean that it's the truth. So in order to step on the road of freedom, we must realize that we must continue to be in a place that exposes us to truth. So number one, we must accept the fact that fear and doubt and pressure will be present at all times. But then number two, what we must also accept is we must endure struggles that we face on a day-to-day basis. So Jesus acknowledged, hey, I realize that struggles will be there, but you must remain. Think of it like working out. If you haven't worked out in a couple of years and you go into the gym the first day, the first week, it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a struggle. You're sore. You can't move. You're like when you're laying down, you're trying to sleep, but it's your body is in pain. But it doesn't mean that pain is necessarily bad. It just means that, hey, your muscles is tearing down to build back up. So pressure is not necessarily negative, but what it means is that it's going to build your character up. But in order to have the character and the fortitude, you must first know I have to continue. I have to continue down this road of success. So Jesus acknowledged that struggles is there, but in order for struggle to be there, right? In order to be successful, you have to go through struggles. You have to go through failure to get to success. So remain is a very, very important key of mental freedom. We must continue to discipline our disappointments, remaining on the road of success. That's number one. Now, in the scripture, number two, it says faithful. Now, I've heard this before, but let's break this down. So from a biblical view, it says, so the definition is faithful means loyal, constant, staunch, steadfast, resolute. It means firm in adherence to whatever one owes allegiance. So it's a commitment. So in order to remain, in order to step on the path of mental freedom, you have to commit to the thing that you want to be mentally free from. Whether if it's fear, whether if it's doubt, whether if it's fear of loss, fear of death, you have to remain firm to the main thing that's going to help you overcome the very fear that is attacking your mind, your spirit. So what Jesus spoke about in faithfulness or faithful, he says, what happens is being committed, you have to commit to the truth. Now notice, I didn't say your truth or someone else's truth, but the truth. It says, exposing yourself to facts and truth of your reality of day-to-day, excuse me. Meaning, hey, you know, and you acknowledge that I am not as strong in this area of my life, but I'm acknowledging that I'm not strong in this area of my life, and I have fear, and I have doubt, and this is my weakness. But because I am not that strong in this area, this is where I press in, faithful, owes one allegiance to now learn the very thing I need to know in order for me to be free. Hey, if you struggle with people skills, hey, realizing that there are books, there are audios, there are seminars that people are putting on that helps to navigate the very thing that you struggle with, which is communication with relationships. Hey, if you know that you struggle in finances, what Jesus is saying is that in order for me to be free, I have to be faithful to the very thing that I want to be free from. But I have to commit first to the facts. And the facts are, hey, these are the things, these are the principles, these are the habits that I must develop in order for me to grow. So I must press in. But then, number two, I have to develop that deep commitment to press into these areas of opportunities. There's 6 areas there's 5 areas that I always talk about working on a day-to-day basis. It's leadership, personal development, attitude, mindset, finances. I teach on that. I say, this is what I press into. 5 things on a day-to-day basis. These are areas of opportunities for me. But I must know and acknowledge that these are areas that I continuously need to work on. But then number 3, the faithfulness. I must monitor the growth in these areas. Because it's just not good enough to just owe an allegiance. It also says in the definition that faithfulness implies an unswerving adherence to a person or a thing, to the oath or a promise by which a tie was contracted. So in essence, this is saying that I have strong beliefs that the very thing that I'm committing to and learning and exposing myself to are the very things that's going to help me to improve for me to not stay where I'm at. But I got to monitor if I'm moving forward. I have to monitor if I'm growing. You can't grow what you don't measure. And that's, in essence, what Jesus is speaking to. But talking point number 3, he talks about teachings. And I want to break this down very simple. The biblical definition to teachings is to deliver a doctrine, art, principles, or words for instruction. So as I'm on this path, and it says remain, it says to continue. So I have to continue, meaning I have to practice something. So if I'm out practicing the wrong thing, I'm just going to learn how to do the wrong thing all the time. So it's not practice makes perfect, but it's perfect practice that makes perfect. So I have to learn, I have to know, I have to expose myself to principles that are never changing. See, truth, the difference from a fact versus a truth is that facts change, but truth doesn't. So principles are key to an individual of mental freedom. What are the principles that I can now abide, or in this essence, that I can now stay faithful to in order for me to now get on and stay on the path of mental freedom? So for principles to happen, here's what it means. You have to consider the source of where you're getting your mindset and personal philosophies from. Because we're being exposed to something, whether if it's the news, whether if it's TV, whether if it's music or friends, family, we're being exposed all the time. But we must first understand, where does it come from? So in order to have the principles in place of success, I must first consider the very source that I'm getting these doctrine or principles from. Because these very principles can be bad for your life. That's why before moving into principles, you must first monitor your growth. You must monitor the very thing you're committing to. But number 2, you must create disciplines around hearing, speaking, and thinking success principles. So it's not good enough just to hear principles, but now you got to speak the principles. Because it says life and death is in the power of the tongue. And I don't want anybody to forget this. We're created mind, body, spirit. So we got to hear. Then we got to speak. Now we have to think. And number 4, now we have to go do. Do the very thing that gets us on the path of success. Now, there's still more. So when Jesus was speaking in verse 32, he made a point that I love to highlight. He said, and. And is very important to remember. The reason why and is very, very important to remember in this process is because when you hear and, what I learned is that it's one with the other. So there's no exception. It's a bundle. It's a relative, right? It's like, hey, I have a sister. No matter what I do, I will always have a sister. So when there's a me, there's a her. I have kids. It doesn't matter what I do, I will always have kids. It's 4 kids, 4 girls, 2 sets of twin girls. So in here, it says something, and it says and. Well, if we take a step back and we think about this process, let's think about it. It says that we must remain. We must continue down the road of success. But number 2, we have to remain. We have to remain, not only remain on this path, we have to stay faithful to the path. We have to stay faithful to the very things that the principles, which is my teachings, that now is requiring of us to be free from the very thing that we desire. So once now going through this process, it says something. It says and. So it means, so as I'm continuing down this road, there's something that comes with this result, which is this key, number 5. And it says, you will know the truth. Now, I like to take my time on this because what's interesting is I asked the question, well, if I'm continuing, if I'm remaining, now I'm remaining on a path, and I'm staying faithful to the very thing that this path is requiring me to stay faithful to with the principles in play, well, why didn't Jesus just say, oh, you're free? Why would he say and? Because here's what he realized. It's a process that we go through where we come to, which is called self-realization. And this is where he now exposes us to the very thing we would like to know, which is the truth. See, I've been the person that in any decision that I made, I always wanted to know the truth. Because whether if it's making a decision on a house, a decision of getting a car, even a decision with making a business partnership. Hey, I need to know some facts here. I need to have something in front of me to make the right decision. And this is no different with our mental freedom. So as we're pressing in, and we are really pressing in a commitment to the very thing we want to be free from, we must first know that once we press in and we're consistent and persistent in our attitude and the way we speak and what we're hearing, what we're listening to, what we're doing, and we're monitoring every single day, Jesus says, then what'll happen is there's a process that happens after that where now you will now know the truth, which is you will now be revealed this truth. Oh man. I didn't realize how bad this was. I didn't realize that smoking would deteriorate my body. I didn't realize that eating bad would deteriorate my body. I didn't realize that me drinking, that it causes brain damage. I didn't realize that. See, but when you're pressing in to success principles, they will expose and they will reveal the very thing you want to know, which is the truth. And you're like, wow. So, really, in this process of knowing this truth, it will help you to realize that this fear that I had was really minimal. Hey, this fear of public speaking, this day, this moment was really not a big deal. Hey, this fear of loss was really not a big deal because it was a figment of my imagination. Because what fear means is false evidence appearing real. See, the truth exposes lies. It exposed the very thing that keeps people in bondage. That's why people seek the truth, because people want to be set free. See, I wanted to be free. See, I wanted to be free from the thought of people's perception. But see, I have to come to a truth that the moment that I leave a conversation, the person is not thinking about me within that next 10, 15 minutes. When I give a presentation, that when people walk away, I'm giving credence to people who are not even thinking about me 5 minutes after I'm done presenting. That's a fact. And so people are bound up with this false evidence appearing real, this figment of your imagination, thinking that, oh wow, you know, this fearful thought of loss, or fearful thought of, oh my, I'm never going to make enough to provide for my family. But is that really the truth? That's not the truth. It's not. Because once you learn principles, they never change. See, principles are something that you can now commit to. Let me give you an example. I remember I was in high school. I had this coach. His name was Coach O. And he coached in the NFL. I think out of the 7 coaches on the high school team, 6 of them went to the NFL. 1 played through college, but never went to the NFL because he wasn't good enough in the NFL to play. But nonetheless, we had 7 coaches who were highly qualified to be coaches. And I remember Coach O, who was the DB coach, defensive back coach. And I remember my first practice with him. He said, all right, guys, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to teach you some simple principles. I'm not going to bog you down with all of the formalities of play calling. I'm going to teach you 3 principles. There's 3 angles you're going to take. I said, okay, right? I said, all right, coach, whatever. He says, James, you're going to come down. You're going to do 180. You're going to do 180 down, 180 up. I said, okay. And then he says, you're only going to do 45-degree angles. And I'm like, okay, coach. And he said, that's it. And that's all I'm going to teach you. Every single practice. So we will go out on the field and he'll just say, hey, and we'll back up. He'll like pull take the ball and do it at a 45-degree angle. then he'll like push it back, and then, all right, we have to do 180. And then if he brings the ball close to him, we'll have to like drive down. And this is what we would do every single day, every single practice. And he'd say, go back, go out on after practice and practice on your techniques. And I'm like, all right, coach. So in the game, I remember in one practice, I had 5 picks. And, the offensive coaches was like, oh my gosh, James is amazing. Like, what happened? Like, man, he just stood out. But it wasn't because I was better than anybody. It's not because I'm bragging here. It's because I studied principles, techniques that are true to this day. Even in the NFL, the very thing that my coach taught me in high school are the same things that coaches in the NFL teach DBs. They start with the basics. It doesn't change. Now, where you become a master at this thing is once you're on the path, which it means remain, continue on this path, now you can become a master of the very thing that you've been on the path for years and years on end. Because now you know the principles, you know the techniques, you know the ins and outs, you know the intricacies, you know the pressure situations. Now you can get into situational football. Let's put it in this way. Now you can get into situational of life. Oh, hey, I know that in this situation that I need to press in a little bit more. Hey, I realized with this individual, I need to be more caring. I need to be more understanding. Hey, I need to be more sensitive with my words because this person can get easily offended. See, you can become a master. But see, in order for you to know something, you first must remain into something. You must be faithful to something. You got to be now. Now you have to not only remain, but now you got to know these teachings and pressing in and monitoring this. And then Jesus says, then you will know the truth. And now when you're like, man, I know this truth now. Hey, I know that this situation is not real. So every time you come up against a situation that you need to speak to an audience, even if the feeling is there, you now know the truth because you've experienced this situation. Now you have a frame of reference to pull from to say, oh, I know what this is. I know what this feeling is. I know what this issue is. I know where this situation is trying to take me. You will now know it. Now notice he didn't say, and I guess you will know this. He says, I know that you will know this. He says, and you will know the truth. Truth exposes lies. Truth exposes confusion. It eliminates confusion. We got to fight for truth. You must fight for truth. But then, last but not least, he says another thing, which is the 6th point. He says, and twofold, the truth will set you free. So in essence, he says, you remain on this path. You realize that we all struggle with something. But it doesn't mean we stay there. We must press in. We must continue towards the path of success, mental freedom. And then we press into faithful, being constant, staunch, firm in allegiance to what? To a principle or principles that will now get us to the very thing of what we need to know. What is the truth? I wasn't good with finances. And I'm going to give you a great example. Now I'm going to end on this point. I wasn't good with finances. I struggled. And in fact, it was one of showstoppers. I remember when before I got married, I was married for over 6 years, and I remember when I met my ex-wife, she said to me when I said, "Hey, I want to marry you," she looked me in the face and said, because she was like, "Okay, that's cool, that's cool," and I said, "But hey, I want to show you my debt structure," and I showed her my debt structure, and this is what she said: "I'm not marrying you with that debt." I was like, "Okay," but you know what it did? It manned me up. Now I could have buckled. I could have been like, "Oh man, she doesn't care about me," but it didn't matter because what I knew is that being debt free puts me on the path of success. Period. Being in debt for the sake of being in debt is not, really a good thing, in my opinion. But I realized that, hey, I needed to get better in this area of my life in order to get a shot, to have a shot at having a good relationship in my marriage. And being in debt all over the place is not one of them for me. So I learned a true principle about finances. I was in addition when God was trying to teach me multiplication. And this is a key principle I will never forget. Addition will never be multiplication. And that there gave me the ammunition for me to change my perspective about finances. I read books. And I'm not talking about I read just, one book or two books. I remember in 1 year, I read over like 250 plus books in 1 year. And out of the 250 plus books that I read, I know 70 of those books were financial books. There's a book by Adam Smith called Wealth of Nations. Now, I wouldn't recommend that book because it's like a 600 plus page book. And even to this day, I'm still reading the book, but it's a good read. It taught me about the capitalistic system. It taught me about finances. There's other books, Gary Casey, Fixing the Money Thing. I put myself on the path. And you know what I did? I have not let up on this path. I've been on this path for 6 years. And I'm not saying I'm perfect or I've made it or I arrived. All I'm saying is for me to stay free, I must, number one, remain. I must remain faithful. I must continue down this path and not give myself a time limit. Well, I'm going to only do this for 2 years. Well, guess what? You should quit now and save money. Because if you're giving yourself a time limit of when you're going down this path and remain on that path, look, just quit. Because you're only going to frustrate yourself. So number one, you got to remain. Number two, faithful. Faithful to what? Faithful to the very thing that you know is right. When you err on the side of right, you'll never be wrong. Faithful. Number two. Number three, principles. You got to be faithful to these principles. And like I said, 5 areas in my life that I focus in on, key principles that I focus in on, personal development, attitude, finances, communication, leadership. 5 things I focus in on every single day of my life. I read books, I listen to audios, I have mentors who are great in these areas, and I press it. So then I realized that in this process that I'm marrying together, that now I will come to know this truth, in which once I'm exposed to this truth, I now realize this truth will set me free and keep me free. So I hope that this message was impactful as it is to me. And I want to thank you, and you have a blessed day. To view all recordings, please go to my YouTube channel, which is called Kingdom Success University, or visit my website at www.beechumsconsultingservices.com. Thank you for listening to Kingdom Success University podcast.